So we're looking at a stack of documents today that, frankly, shouldn't exist, or, we were never meant to see them.
Right.
These are top-secret flash telegrams.
Yeah.
They're flying back and forth between the CIA station in Leopoldville, that's Kinshasa now, and headquarters in Washington, D.C.
And the timeline is incredibly tight. We're talking about just 1 week, September 8th to September 13th, 1960.
Welcome to our deep dive into the Africa Intelligence Files. Today, we're not just rehashing the general history of the Congo Crisis.
No, the mission here is really to look at the mechanics. When a superpower decides it needs to, steer a foreign government that it sees as spiraling, how do they actually do it?
What does the paperwork look like?
Exactly. We're stripping away the spy novel stuff.
Yeah, this is about the bureaucracy of a coup. You can almost feel the panic in the cables, the improvisation, and the very specific language they use to justify it all.
And we should be clear, these are specific CIA telegrams about the plan to oust Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba.
It's a real fly-on-the-wall view?
It is, but let's set a ground rule. We're not here to find conspiracies. We're analyzing the institution of intelligence. How did they see the world in 1960? And how did they justify their own actions, to themselves in real time?
Okay, so let's drop right into it. The context. It's September 1960.
Just a few months after independence from Belgium.
And the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is already fracturing. People call it the constitutional crisis,
Right.
But on the ground it was just chaos.
It was a two-headed state. You've got President Joseph Kasavubu, who the West sees as, a safe bet, a conservative, a moderate.
Maybe a bit hesitant, though.
A bit hesitant, quiet. And then you have Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba.
The populist?
The firebrand. He's charismatic, a nationalist, and Washington is absolutely terrified that he's going to open the door to Soviet influence right in the heart of Africa.
So by September, these two men have fired each other.
Literally. Kasavubu dismisses Lumumba. Lumumba goes on the radio and says, "No, I'm still prime minister, and by the way, I dismiss Kasavubu."
And the Constitution, this fundamental law, it was so vague, nobody really knew who had the final say.
So you've got a divided parliament, troops in the streets, the UN trying to keep order. It's into this total confusion that the CIA sees an opening.
And that's exactly where our cables begin. The first thing that jumps out from that September 8th cable is just sheer frustration.
Oh, absolutely. The station chief isn't writing home about some brilliant, successful operation. He's complaining.
He's saying his assets, the local politicians they're counting on to get rid of Lumumba, are failing.
There's that amazing line where he says his contacts are bungling the coup. He says they lack guts.
Which tells you so much about the mechanics of this. We had this image of the CIA pulling strings and puppets dancing.
But here, the puppets are all tangled up. The station is panicking because their whole plan is stalling. They're trying to push Kasavubu to be decisive, but he's just dragging his feet.
And that panic, it leads to one of the most revealing cables in the whole file. It's from Washington, dated September 13th. It's a reply to the station's complaints.
I know exactly the one you mean. Headquarters writes back saying they're sympathetic to the frustration, given the, and this is a direct quote, the naivete of human material they're dealing with.
Naivete of human material, that phrase. It does so much work.
It really does. And you have to look at it from an operational perspective, not just a moral one. It lays bare their entire institutional worldview.
Right.
The Congolese leaders, they aren't partners. They aren't allies with their own agendas. They're material, like clay. And the CIA is the sculptor, frustrated that the clay won't hold the shape they want.
So the problem isn't their policy. The problem is that the humans involved are, flawed.
Exactly. The naivete they're complaining about is really just the messiness and unpredictability of local politics. They wanted a clean, simple Cold War fight, and what they got was a complicated post-colonial power struggle.
But there's a paradox there, isn't there? In that same cable, they call the material naive, but at the same time, they are clearly terrified of Lumumba's competence.
Oh, deeply. They explicitly warn Washington that if Lumumba is allowed to speak to Parliament, he will win them over.
It's the highest compliment you could possibly pay someone, right? But it's disguised as this massive threat. They mention his talents and dynamism.
They admit Parliament is vulnerable to almost any talented speaker.
Just think about what that means. They aren't afraid of his army. They aren't afraid of his spies.
No.
They're afraid that if he gets near a microphone, he'll persuade people with his words.
Which tells you everything you need to know about the goal. The goal isn't democracy. The institutional logic is about control. If the democratic process, a debate, a vote, is likely to produce a Lumumba victory, then that process itself becomes the threat.
The democracy is the problem.
And so they're willing to take calculated risks to pull the hat out of the fire.
So let's talk about those risks. They don't just sit back and hope. They start directing the play.
Scripting it. That's not even a metaphor.
No, it's literal. That September 9th cable. Washington sends a message that is basically a screenplay for President Kasavubu. It's a 6-point list of what he should do.
This is the influence mechanism right here. It's about legitimacy. They don't just say seize power, they tell him to go to the United Nations.
The list says, declare yourself chief of state, demand control of the airports, demand the radio stations.
And then there's the branding, which is just fascinating. Point 6 tells him to frame the whole fight as saving the Congo from communism or colonialism.
He has to use those specific words.
The magic words. It's the masterstroke of the script. They're feeding him the exact buzzwords that will trigger automatic support from the West. If Kasavubu says he's fighting communism, the U.S. has its pretext to back him. The CIA is basically writing the press release for the coup.
But even with this script, the political solution is shaky. Kasavubu is still hesitant. He isn't the strongman they need.
And that's when you see the pivot in the files. The moment the station decides to stop betting on the politicians.
And start betting on the gun.
The long shot.
It's exactly. In that September 13th cable, the station tells Washington they've decided to bet on a long shot. And that long shot is a 29-year-old Army colonel, Joseph Mobutu.
Who, of course, becomes Mobutu Sese Seko, the dictator, for decades. But right then, in that moment, he's just this young, stressed-out military officer.
And the cables give a detailed account of a meeting. The station chief meets with Mobutu. Mobutu is complaining, he's worried the Soviets are getting involved, and then he asks the big question.
He asks if the United States will back him if he acts.
And the station chief says,
I believe we will.
And that's it. That's the hinge point. That's the moment power shifts from the Parliament building to the army barracks.
It is. The station chief actually admits later that he didn't technically have the authority to set U.S. policy in a hallway, but he did it anyway. He gave Mobutu the green light. He committed the U.S. to backing a military coup because the political material Kasavubu was too hard to work with.
And we have to talk about the money. The cables are incredibly frank about the role of cash.
Oh, cash is a major character in this story. The station confirms providing financial help directly to Mobutu so he can pay his troops and secure their loyalty.
But it goes deeper. The station chief mentions a plan for Parliament that involves buying the first senator.
Buying the first senator. That's a direct quote.
It is. They are literally discussing how to bribe senators to win a vote of no confidence. If you can't win the argument with dynamism like Lumumba, you just buy the votes.
And that raises such a huge question about what this does to a new political system. When you inject foreign cash into a parliament that's only a few months old, you're breaking it.
How so?
You're breaking the link between the politician and the voter. If a senator's power, his wealth, comes from a foreign spy agency and not from his constituents, who does he listen to? You're teaching the entire political class that real power comes from external patrons, not from the people.
There's also that darker undertone in the September 8th cable. The elimination aspect.
Right. The station reports a conversation with one of their contacts who implies they might need to physically eliminate Lumumba.
And the CIA's reaction is not, whoa, stop, that's illegal.
No, their reaction is to analyze it as a strategic option. They write back that, quote, Lumumba in opposition is almost as dangerous as in office.
It's what you might call structural permission.
That's a great way to put it. They aren't issuing a direct kill order in that sentence, but they are validating the logic. They are agreeing with the premise that his very existence is a threat, which implicitly condones a permanent solution.
So the bet is placed on Mobutu, the script is written, the money is flowing. What happens next?
Well, the immediate effect is that the democratic chaos is silenced. Mobutu makes his move on September 14th, just one day after that long-shot table. He neutralizes both politicians and shuts down Parliament.
And Lumumba?
He's put under house arrest, he eventually escapes, is captured, and then brutally executed in January 1961. The dynamism that the agency was so afraid of, it's extinguished.
And Mobutu stays.
For 37 years. The long shot paid off for the agency. They got their stability. They got their anti-communist stronghold. But for the Congo, it was the beginning of decades of dictatorship and state-sponsored corruption.
And the structure of that dictatorship was really cemented in these few chaotic days. It wasn't an accident.
It was a choice. That's the takeaway. It wasn't personal animosity. It was an institutional decision that prioritized order and predictability over the messy reality of a new democracy. They saw the chaos and said, we can't work with this. We need a strong man.
So if we bring this to today, I mean, we don't send cables like this anymore, obviously.
The tech has changed, but the mechanisms of influence, the systems, they are surprisingly similar. I mean, look at how they focus on the United Nations in these documents.
The script for Kasavubu was all about appealing to the UN for legitimacy.
Precisely. They wanted the coup to look legal to the outside world. Today, powerful nations still use international bodies to legitimize their actions. They build a coalition, they get a resolution passed. Legitimacy is a manufactured product.
And that preference for the boring leader over the populist.
The technocrat versus the firebrand, you see it all the time. There is a deep institutional fear of the charismatic leader who can actually rally the masses, because that person is unpredictable.
Agencies, foreign ministries, they prefer the Kasavubis of the world, the people who are, manageable.
Even if the manageable guy has no popular support. And that's because influence today is rarely a spy with a gun. It's money. It's a drafted speech. It's using parliamentary procedure as a weapon. It's buying the first senator.
So if you're listening to this and trying to understand a crisis in the news today, what should you look for?
You should look at the source of the script. When a new leader emerges, are their words resonating with their own people, or do they sound like they're tailored for an international audience? Are they dynamic, or are they safe?
And where is their legitimacy coming from? From voters or from an external power?
And that brings us back to speech. The station chief wrote that Lumumba had to be removed because he could sway events to his advantage just by talking.
Just by talking.
It suggests that, in the eyes of a superpower, political speech that they cannot control is a weapon just as dangerous as an army.
So if a foreign power fears a leader's voice more than their guns, that tells you something profound about where real power actually lies.
It really does. It tells you the one thing they couldn't manufacture was a genuine connection to the people. They could manufacture a coup, but they couldn't manufacture charisma.
We've seen how a superpower can operate in the shadows, not with magic, but with cash, scripts, and a whole lot of frustration. Thanks for unpacking these files with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.